Pirate Kings, Pirate Queens, non-binary monarchs of the sea, hello, what's going on? How is it going? Happy 8.5 and happy Halloween, everybody. I'm in a bit of a rush, what else is new, because I'm trying to get this recorded before I go to work on Thursday so I can get it out at some point during Friday before deck submission for San Diego closes, if this ends up being helpful to anyone who is still trying to figure out their deck list for a tournament this weekend. Star decks 15 through 20 have come out, the ones with red Edward Newgate, green Uta, blue Doflamingo, purple Luffy, black Smoker, yellow Katakuri, the whole shebang here. We've been waiting on these for quite a while. I know some people were like full-on OP08 haters because they just wanted the Star decks to come out. I thought we had a pretty cool format myself, but now that we are in it, now that we do have all these new cards, I am very excited to have this new format available to play in. Now, to anyone who has seen my videos before, you know exactly what to expect here. For anyone who's new, here's a very quick breakdown of my process. What I do is I look at data for the One Piece card game, whether that is tournaments from the eastern side of the world, if we have an equivalent format to them, but lately on OP Bounty, checking how often each leader's played, how often that leader wins, weighing those statistics against each other to put a ranking of the leaders together, and also give a standardized winning deck list for each leader that I have data for in order to give everyone a good starting point. For this video, I have been focusing solely on the OP08.5 1 billion berry bounty lobby on OP Bounty. I know they just started adding the billion tier in, around, I believe it was the start of OP8 when, we had OP08 post-ban. I've been going back and forth. I've even, for myself, found a way to kind of try and bridge the gap and try and specify for a particular player's skill level. However, the OP08, just all-player-based lobby on OP Bounty that I've been able to find data for, still has some pre-ban stuff in there, so I'm not able to do that for this video. We'll see if I can bring that around for OP09. Here's the methodology. I'm not going to give you the full spiel this time. Just know that I have tried a couple new things in order to make the best use of the data that I have, add some measures that I've been using for myself into the mix for the broader player base as a whole. Some of these conclusions I come to may be controversial, but if you don't like it, let me know. Thank you for the engagement. But this is going to be basically all of the games played in 8.5 at 1 billion bounty or higher with the bans involved. Not necessarily in the last week or anything like that last video for OP08 I had. Just so we can still have a workable sample size to have something to go off of. Because you'll see some of these leaders have very few games. And that gets me into I think the main potential source for error here is that there is a small sample size, even compared to the sample sizes I have done before. A lot of things can change. And also, it's weird. It's a sample size that is too small, number of games-wise, but too big, amount of time-wise. Certain decks that we all know are very powerful may have a lower win rate than they will going forward because people were still learning those decks. Hint, hint, wink, wink, Doffy, nudge, nudge. I'll try and give context where context is due. I also might be running through these pretty quickly. I have no script for this. We're just going pretty much off the dome and off the charts. So starting off with the data itself, here is the breakdown of games played by each leader relative to each other, aka the meta shares here. I usually find the 1 billion berry bounty lobby meta shares to be pretty close to something we would see in an actual tournament. I would not be surprised if this is how San Diego goes, for instance. At least with the size of the portions, some things may switch around. But Doffy was just over a quarter of the metagame, then Luffy and Lucci coming in just behind that, Bonnie and Black Yellow Luffy just about at 8%. They have Katakuri, Enel, and Nami between 3 and 5. Smoker, Red Purple Luffy, Reiju, Black Luffy, Zoro, Marco, and Yamato above 1%, and then everything else below 1%. And, less than 125 games. You may be seeing a pie chart on your screen. You may just be seeing a table. It's all going to depend on how much time I have to edit this whole thing. Now, what I have normally done for these tier lists, at least in the OP Bounty era of my data analysis, is I have taken the overall win rate for each leader and then used the amount of games played by each leader as a metric to weigh them, to adjust for any error caused by a smaller sample size for one leader than the other. If I do so here, this is what the tier list would look like. Honestly, this isn't something that I am mad at personally. I think this is pretty close to what we're going to end up with, at least for the power levels at this particular moment based on this data set. But there is something else that I can do to add to this. One of the many lovely things about OP Bounty is that they do track matchup rates for each leader against every other leader. And that's honestly the point of specificity that I look toward the most when I'm trying to figure out what leader I'm going to play for a tournament. So here you will see a matchup chart of the win rates for each leader against the top 11 most played leaders. We do have this on OP Bounty. You can just open the chart, and their version will be, a little bit more recent than mine since it's been, I think, a day or two as of recording since I put this down on the spreadsheet, probably a day or two after once this is released. But I do have to, type it out manually if I want to do the math with these. So this is, I think, the broadest scope I can put out there while still being able to get this done in a somewhat timely manner, these top 11 decks. And also after these top 11, the impact is pretty much negligible. So what we can do here is find the expected value, the expected number of wins for each leader. Take a leader's win rate against Doflamingo, multiply that by Doffy's meta share. Then do the same for Lucci, do the same for Luffy, do the same for all the other decks that we have this data for. That will give us the expected number of wins for that leader in a tournament. Now, if we do that, we come to a very interesting conclusion, which you'll see here. To me, this looks fun. This is honestly very exciting to me, but you'll see that, it's 1,300 games for Enel, 135 games for Bello Betty. I want to be a Bello Betty truther, but I can't in good faith base my tier list solely off of this, as cool as it is. I think Enel's Doffy matchup is doing so much to pull it ahead here, and, not everyone is going to run into mostly Doffys in a tournament. That's just how it's going to go. So what do? I want to be more specific than just going off of the overall win rate because I have this matchup data, but if I just go off of the expected value, that's not going to work. Well, what I can do is I can take the approach I did in the previous tier list. I can use this expected value and then weigh that to the number of games. And that is the order in which I'm going to go over these deck lists for you right now. Just a reminder of the tiers I use. I take the minimum and the maximum scores, just divide them into 10 groups, give them a number from 0 to 10. Woe will be anything from 0 to 2.5. Is 2.5 to 5. Rogue is 5 to 7. C is 7 to 8. B is 8 to 9. And then A is 9 to 10. Not doing the tier 0, 1, 2, 3, blah, 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 because we don't have actual tournament results to go off of, so it's not as easy to see what is oppressive compared to other decks. And I do know that it's very common opinion that Doffy is oppressive in the East, but there's also something to be said about whether that is 8.5 versus 9, and how much we have to think about the fact that we are reacting to the oppressive Doffy meta, how that may affect how things end up on our side of the world. So starting from the bottom, in Woe, with a score of 0.18, we have Edward Newgate. Lots of cool stuff in this red star deck. People have managed to get games in with him on billion tier, so that means they either worked their way up to billion with him, or they're a player who's good enough to get into billion and they still see him as worth playing, or they're just memeing. Either way, I might take him for a spin for a couple games. He's still cool. Then we have Red Purple Kid, still crashing out, still have that Porsche engine, even though it is taken back a little bit because we have these new straw hats available. Very cool here. Number 30 is Yellow Calgara. Really not much changing. We're just swapping our counters around. Some people managed to play with Green Purple Doffy here. That off-white from EBO1, the one that lets you, I believe it's a 2-cost 4K counter, and then you get a Doffy Pirates from the top some number of cards. I don't remember which. We also have that Rush King from OP08. It looks neat. We still have Birdcage. We have the Noro Beam Sword. Whoever put this together, they're chefing. I love it. Red Black Sabo. I still think this deck is so cool, even though I did not manage to play it in an actual tournament for OP08, and it's a little further down on the tier list now in this ST 15 through 20 meta, but he's here. If you still want to chef with him, people are still trying the Animal Pirates. The Animal package with him. Gecko Moria, still doing Moria things, still resurrecting, still KOing, still trying to win that resource game. And Red Yellow Sabo, a lot more 1 and 2 ofs in this list than any others. I think that most of these wins were gotten by a couple of very, very similar lists. So, props to them. And heading into tier, we have Zoro Sanji, Peep the One Rush Usopp. That's pretty nifty. I like that a lot. Green Uta making the most of the cards from that new starter deck, number 16. We have Carrot, still keeping that Minx with a little bit of a Doffy package in there. Blue Hancock, really just using that new law from the starter deck. It doesn't get as much out of this new Warlord package as Doflamingo does, but she still made it into hot tier. Charlotte Pudding, really nothing new to say here. We play less Newgate. What even changed here? Oh, we're adding Yamato now. Actually, Yamato is a pretty cool inclusion here. Very good if we're trying to hit into all those 4 costs the board is going to be flooded with. Even if it's not necessarily enough, it's still pretty cool. My guy Marco definitely is able to use some of the stuff from the new starter deck, particularly the new Ace and that Newgate. It's another great KO option. The Thatch as well. I do love the Thatch here. Vegapunk, I don't think much has really changed from that last Vegapunk list I showed with him. Foxy at number 18 with a 4.5 score. There's some cool, I like stun. Red Ace. Now, I'm not going to say that this is a great score, but I was surprised to see this leader doing this well. Just getting into hot tier is a victory for him. We haven't seen him do much in a while, so I'll probably sleeve it up. I'll try it out for a tournament or something. Number 16, Bella Betty. Oh man, the cope was real with this one. For a very brief second, she had a 64 into Doffy, a 56 into Purple Luffy, a 50 into Lucci, a 67 into Bonnie. The only reason she didn't have a positive into BY Luffy was because there were no games played. 80 into Katakuri, but then, that's just so few games. That's really not something to go on, and as soon as people started playing more this week, that those rates dropped very steeply. I was this close to bringing her to San Diego just for the meme. If you do, I respect you. Then at the top of hot tier at number 15, we have Green Yellow Yamato. Couple cool things here. Beige feels important here. The Nami and the Luffy to, mitigate that insane board Dovy's going to have feel useful here. He's trying to adapt. Good for him. Heading into Rogue, we have number 14, Red Zoro. Animal package was a great buff for Zoro, but he has gone down quite a bit. Perona at number 13. Krieg as a tool against Doffy. That is sick. Whoever started putting that in, nice include. Red Purple Luffy gets a big boost from this new starter deck. Not as big a boost as he'll get from OP09, but he did make it into Rogue tier here. Reiju at number 11. Really nothing new here. Deck is just good if you hit well and you know how to play it. And this one might be a bit controversial. Purple Luffy at number 10. The second most played deck in this data set, but the data, where the wins go, put him all the way down at number 10. And I personally am a Purple Luffy stan. I love this deck. To me, it was the dark horse of 8.0. I played it in my last regional. I think it was very much underrated up until this last week when everyone seemed to finally, realize how good he was. It's just that starter deck number 18 is not enough for him to keep up with starter deck 17's buff to Doffy and what everyone else is doing about that. Purple Luffy's really going to come into his own in set 9. When we get that secret rare Rush Luffy, when we get the Rush Sanji, then this new Straw Hat package is really able to see its full potential. Then Purple Luffy is truly a top tier contender. For now, I do not think he is the pick before set 9. At least not to the degree that he has been recently and that he will be in the near future. Not a bad deck per se, but definitely not, where he could be. Katakuri at number 9. The only new card from Star Deck 20 we are seeing in here is the 2K Counter Brûlée, the one that on trigger lets you stack the top card of your opponent's life and then bring her back to hand. That's incredibly powerful. You get the best of both worlds with her. You get to have your wedding cake and eat it too. Katakuri is a very generic leader, so there is plenty of room for variation here. I think that a lot of the cards from Star Deck 20, in addition to Brûlée, are good. I like the 5-cost 6K Katakuri. I like the Linlin, potentially. Definitely some room to chef around with this one. Number 8, Star Deck 14, Luffy. Very reminiscent of the lists we've been seeing lately. We do have Laboon in here now, which I think is a really cool inclusion. I can't say much more because I have not played a single game with the deck, so I'm not going to act like I know more about it than I do. I also have not had a chance to try out number 7, Smoker, although I really want to. I miss seeing him. This leader's never truly had his time to shine. Hopefully it is now. I'm not going to say he has a great matchup spread. It's definitely not as good as it was a week ago. But against these top 3 decks, they are winnable at the very least, with some practice, I assume. Bonnie's a great matchup. Black Yellow Luffy is where things start to dip quite a bit, but depending on how good that Black Yellow Luffy player is, if they really know what they're doing, there might not the matchup rate might not matter at that point. That's just how that deck goes. Nami at number 6. I personally still think her existence is valid, but that Doffy matchup and that Luffy matchup are not looking great. She just does well against everything else. So far, she has been the gatekeeper. Actually, she is just the gatekeeper. Then we have Black Yellow Luffy at number 5. I have no issue with this personally. I do think that in the hands of the best player in the world, it can be the best deck in the format. But as I've said many times, it's going to depend on how much experience you have with the deck. The Bonnie matchup in the billion tier. Again, this is all players who have a bounty of 1 billion or higher. Still is not great, but definitely a solid pick. Speaking of Bonnie, we have her at number 4. Only thing holding her back is Lucci. Good matchups otherwise, so, if you can dodge that one, she's amazing. And that new Shanks actually can do a lot to help you in the matchup. They rest the Jack anyway, so Shanks can just come down and KO him. Just depends what else they have in the arsenal, to be honest. Okay, if you put me on the stake, I understand, but again, this is the data talking. Some of these I'm just as surprised as you are. Number 3, Enel. I swear, I did not try and pull the strings. If anything, I was trying to bring him lower if in my quest for a different algorithm to rank these decks. This is where he's at. The Doffy matchup is amazing. And over the past week, if anything, his matchups have just gotten better. Because this 50-50 into Lucci was a 31-69 a week ago. What I will say is that this is the list in this video where I am not quite sure I agree with it as much. I personally, just based on my past experience with Enel, want 2 of the Rush Enel 7 cost versus Lucci just to hit them right in the face, try and power through, try to get that sticky body to, circumvent their removal. I also have not had a chance to play it much. I've barely played any games of 8.5 because I've just been all over the place. Take my thoughts on the list itself with a grain of salt. But I do feel like if there's one deck that I have something to say about, it's probably going to be Enel. The Doffy matchup is definitely the thing that is pushing him to number 3, but the amount of matchups here that are, near 50-50, I think there's something to be said for that. And if you are a player who likes a deck that can just be reliable, winnable into most of the field, this is the one for you. And at number 2... not number 1, number 2, silver medal, we have our boogeyman, blue Doffy. The deck is cracked. This deck is insane. Cheating out characters without losing cards from your hand. The sheer amount of combo potential you have with the new Boa Hancock, the Jinbei. The fact that you can shift into a more mid-range to control strategy. The fact that you can aggro past Black's final blockers with Perfume Femur. This deck has so many tools. The 2-cost teach there, I'm unsure about. I've heard a lot of different opinions about it. Personally, where I've been at, I've been feeling like the Crocodile might be more useful. But again, zero experience with the deck personally. I fully reserve the right to change that opinion as time goes on. And I do think that this is the deck that suffers most from the fact that this has a wider time frame in this data set. The fact that as 8.5 data started being collected, people were still very new to the deck, and there are so many nuances with how you play this deck, how you build this deck, how you react to every matchup, and the fact that every Doffy player is going to have to tailor their Doffy list to their own playstyle. As time goes on, as we have a data set that just has more recent results, with players being more used to this format, I would not be surprised if Doffy shoots back up into number 1. And from what I've been seeing in 09, Doffy is firmly in number 1 according to this matchup rate. But of course, anything can happen as we react to the previous meta, and that's what's so great about this game. And then finishing us off at number 1 is Rob Lucci. Honestly, nothing crazy to say about this list, aside from the fact that there are 4 Suitor here. I know Suitor has become a controversial card in Lucci. I know that around 7 post-ban, people were starting to cut her so often. This is just me theory crafting. This makes sense to me. I think the 3rd Suitor, was pretty much mandatory according to this data set. The 4th one ended up being the include past the skeleton list, if that makes sense. But with the amount of 5k bodies or 6k bodies, with the Weevil going on, that Doffy is going to throw at you, we need more 2k counters, and Suitor lets you reduce for just 1 don. With the amount of removal Lucci has to do in order to beat Doffy, that is crucial. At least that's how I've rationalized this choice. If you have other thoughts on it, please let me know. I'm looking to learn just as much as the rest of us are. especially because I've not played this deck much since the beginning stages of Set 8. And again, as time goes on, these matchup rates could change wildly, especially as people are now stepping off of 8.0 into 8.5. We'll see how things go. I'd love to keep putting the data out there, but you know how it goes. It's just going to depend on how timing works. But before I finish off, there is one other thing I want to show. I think in my own time in using data to select what deck I use for a tournament, this sort of measure we've had of just going off of the expected win rate of a deck has been something that has been very useful to me. I think in recent times, I have wanted to have as many positive matchups as possible, or even matchups as possible, the amount of winnable matchups. And so I did come up with one more measure, basically figuring out the percentage of these top 11 decks that you have a winnable matchup into. And for me, that's like, I'd say 46% or higher. 46, it's not 50-50, but there are things that can just push it those couple points either way, and practice can potentially mitigate that. Here is that list. I did not use this one for the ranking of the decks in the slides, just because I know that this is not what every player is going to be looking for. But this is putting me in the direction of Enel. This is probably why I played Enel before in the first place. And again, this all is liable to change. But if you are the kind of person who just wants to have a reliable pick, if you have had a chance to test as much, but you feel comfortable with a certain deck and you want to see just how am I into the field? How safe am I into the field that's been played so far? Hopefully this is useful for you. And then if you're like kind of in the middle of both of those, here's the average between the slides ranking I did and that last list. Lucci, BDIF in this one. In almost every measure, Lucci became the top of the pack. I was really trying to see if there was one way that Doffy could work, but it's at this moment, Lucci has just managed to edge him out, and we'll see if that holds this weekend in San Diego. I would not be surprised if Doffy does end up taking it just because people have gotten a lot more practice in this week. But we will see. I am glad I was able to get something out to y'all. I know these rankings, there are a lot of different arrangements, and it may not be something you can put stock in as much as my other videos. I'd say this is mainly for the deck lists. The rankings were just so I had a way to present them to you. Either way, if this has been helpful, let me know. If you have your own thoughts, if you have any questions about these lists, I'd love to hear them and field them down below. If you found this content helpful, if you enjoyed listening to me ramble about stats and math and cards, feel free to leave a like. And if you want to know when the eventual Set 9 analysis comes out, or any other potential thoughts I might be able to vomit out into YouTube in the meantime, feel free to subscribe. Always grateful for another person who is listening to the content, and I hope you have a wonderful time playing 8.5.